Film Club.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Film Club. I'm one of your hosts, Andy Harrison, and with me, as always, it's Andy Donaldson.
Hello.
Every week in Film Club, we invite you along to watch a film with us, and this week we're taking a look at The Hurt Locker.
So The Hurt Locker is set in the 2004 Iraqi War, and it's a bomb disposal squad. It sets a scene of a three-piece, and unfortunately lose their main member, who the guy disarms the bombs. So here comes Jerry Morena, lackadaisical as he is, despite being a bomber expert, and he kind of has a different approach to this and causes a rift between the team. And eventually all the atrocities of war comes and affects each of the three of them differently. When I first saw this, I didn't understand it. I didn't like it, and I thought, what a shit film. How the hell is that one Best Director, Best Picture, right? But then a couple of years later, I came back and watched it again. I thought, holy shit, I get it now. What a great film. I don't know what happened that day that I watched it, but I was in a bad mood, and I thought it was shit, and it's actually brilliant. It's actually a fantastic war film, similar to Jarhead in the sense it's less about even though it's got some great action sequences, it's less about the action of war, but also about more so about the kind of psychological impact of war. And loads of films do that and approach that perspective, but this does it so well because it's got that trio of three separate people that kind of bounce off each other but also frustrate each other.
My first time watching this was through Love Film. Do you remember the old Love Film rental service?
Oh, wow.
You would get your DVD from your list and then you'd watch it, send it back and wait for your next DVD to arrive. I know it got a lot of love, mostly because Kathryn Bigelow is an excellent director, and yep, she won Best Director. The film itself won Best Picture. And I think it also won Original Screenplay, the Oscar for that
5
as well.
different awards, yeah.
And most importantly is the fact that that is the first Best Picture to have ever been directed by a woman.
Tell you what, I'm gonna buy, let me see if I have enough money. Yeah. I'm gonna buy another DVD, okay? But if it's shaky, look at me, or out of focus, or anyway not 100%, I'm gonna chop off your goddamn head with a dull knife. How do you feel about it? I'm just kidding. You're a good kid, man. You're a good kid, aren't you?
First and foremost, thing that hits me in the face every time I watch this is Barry Ackroyd's cinematography, because the film is
So good.
It's shot like this, verite documentary style, fly
Fly
on the wall, following
yeah, that's
them
what I
around.
got.
And I love that sort of comes from the guy who wrote this is a guy called Mark Ball, and he actually worked as a journalist, a video journalist, with people in the Iraq War. And that's where a lot of the inspiration for this film comes from. It's, the characters are amalgamations of people that he met at the time. Scenes and moments have come from some of his experiences or stories that people would tell him while he was over there. And I love that they follow that through into the cinematography by making it feel like it's shot by somebody who is on a journalistic exploration with those soldiers.
But yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the sound department, or should I say lack of sound, the use of ambience and lack of music, apart from when it's the heavy rock elements to go about like Jerry Renner's character, or one of my absolute favorite scene in the film is the sniper scene and just that kind of tension. Oh my days, that is hands down one of the most tense and one of the best scenes in a war film I've ever seen.
I think it's fantastic that what they do, they've got this sort of commitment to being realistic, being grounded, portraying the Iraq War as realistically as possible. And there's definitely ways in which they don't do that, but whatever. But with that particular scene, I love that it fizzles out. It doesn't come to this big Hollywood climax of the final shot getting fired. He eventually turns around and says, I think we're done.
And what I also like about the scene is it illustrates the kind of the connections that they make as characters. I mentioned before about there's a trio of different characters. You look at the start, and Anthony Mackie comes over and he's frustrated at Jerry Morena. But as we progress towards the film, there's a kind of mutual respect for them two characters. And then as we move forward in that same scene, you got Brian Geraghty, who is a specialist, and he's like freaking out. He's got his speak to his doctor, he's got his issues. And then it's whilst he's normally kind of a bit more nonchalant, Sergeant James, isn't it? He kind of calms him down, says, "You're doing good, spit and wipe the bullets." And then there's that lovely little scene where he's like, "Oh, can he get his Sanborn? Can he get some juice?" And that he gets the juice together and gives it to Sanborn. the reliance on each other, which is, they all say, Foxhole, you got to rely on one another. And there's this lovely chemistry between them all, despite their their opposition.
I like that at the time they weren't exactly big name actors. And
I didn't know this, you see. I didn't know this at all.
Yeah, they become very well realized characters like throughout the film. Like a lot of it you can tell is coming from little personal quirks. Anthony Mackie is a little bit tense and a little bit like pensive on certain things. You've got like Jeremy Renner, who keeps his little like collection of artifacts and memorabilia under his bed, and it's very closed off. Like I like that everybody feels very well realized.
You've even got like Ralph Fiennes and Guy Pearce. I was really surprised to see him in there.
I don't adore this film, but it's not because of something that is clearly objective. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I think the film is problematic in terms of its pacing for me. A lot of the scenes are disconnected. They're about like this moment is happening. We're going to deal with it. Cut to the next day or cut to a week later, and we've got another random event happening. Cut to a week later, another random event is happening. Nothing's connected. And I get why they did that. It makes total sense as to why they did it. That is a representation of war. Your story does not follow a linear path. Nothing's connected. My favorite example of that is when Jeremy Renner actually sneaks off the base and goes looking for the kid. He ends up in the house holding a gun to that guy and his presumably his wife. And he sort of looks around for a second and realizes, what am I doing? This is not a Hollywood film. I'm not going to go and find the people responsible for this kid's killing. Like, that's not how this story ends. Like, I really love that. So I get that what they've decided to do is present a collage of war. Presumably when you wake up on an army base and you get sent out somewhere one day, it doesn't connect to what you did 3 days ago. It doesn't connect to what you did a month ago. These are random events. And at the core, Kathryn Bigelow does exactly the right thing. She instead keeps the character development and the characters at the center of it. So all these random elements of plotting are all having a psychological impact instead. But what that does for me is it creates a difficult watch. It becomes very slow and very sluggish, and I do feel the film's a bit bloated.
I did feel towards the last third that the pacing did fall off a little bit. It went a bit too kind of chaotic, let's say. Whereas the original start, the first 2/3, let's say, at least up until that sniper point, or at least until James finds the body of what he appears to be, the kid Beckham. I did find that the pacing up until then was exactly what I wanted, but I did notice it towards end.
So then, can I contrast that with what is maybe the best thing about this film, and it's the audio design?
It's so good. It's so good, isn't it?
The film will absolutely blast you and overwhelm you with like gunfire and bullets and debris like flying everywhere, and then it'll completely juxtapose that, and it'll go into essentially a silent scene with nothing but like footsteps on concrete as they slip into somewhere as quiet as possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's one of the things I noticed. And again, we were on about the sniper scene where it's just absolutely quiet to the suddenly around the corner, and the specialist is there's a guy in the track's absolutely paggering him, and he's like pat 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 with his rifle, and he's just suddenly like you're into it with this kind of noise, and it's just like, oh, calm down. But that's how it is, you go from one moment to another. And whilst we don't have personal experience, I mean, if that's just a fly on the wall kind of approach from a war journalistic perspective, imagine what it's like to be in the real picture and be in the bomb disposal team. It's a very kind of layman insight into the atrocities of war, and not just that, as I said, the psychological atrocities of war.
For the Iraq War, I actually think this is probably the quintessential film.
The one that competes in terms of idealism, but more so attributed to the director, is American Sniper, because that does touch on a couple of same principles, but I feel like it's a bit more pro-American.
The three that generally come up, right? Hurt Locker, American Sniper, Jarhead.
Jarhead, he's so underrated.
So there is the Hurt Locker. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of the film. But Andy and I are going to be back once again next week, where we're going to take a look at one more Kathryn Bigelow film. It's time for Point Break.
Cheers, guys.
Till then, you can get watching.